קודם כל היום זה החלק הראשון מבין שני חלקים. היום זה ערב המבוא כמובן לטיפול פסיכדלי. היום אנחנו מעבירים את התיאוריה של מהו טיפול פסיכדלי למעשה, אז מה ולמה. ומחר יש לנו יום סדנה, יום ארוך, שאני יודעת שחלק גדול מהאנשים פה נרשמו עליו, שהוא יותר יהיה איך וכמה. אז היום אנחנו מספקים את התיאוריה, ומחר זה יהיה החלק הפרקטי יותר, ממש את כלי העבודה. והיום, אגב, עכשיו אני אעבור לאנגלית, today is Thanksgiving in the United States of America, which is quite an important holiday. It's a holiday where we give thanks and gratitude to everything we have in our lives. And we're so grateful to be here and to basically have this gratitude ceremony with all of you guys. And would you like to say a couple of things before we start the ceremony?
Sure. My name is Ben. I'm not sure what's been said about me so far. Nothing. Okay, that makes it easy. I'm a pharmacist by training, and specifically I'm a psychiatric pharmacist. So I deal with mental health conditions, and in my day job, mostly pharmaceutical types of mental health drugs. However, my path to pharmacy kind of began with an intrigue, a fascination, and love for psychedelics. So at this point in time, it's incredibly exciting for me because it seems that we're on the brink of seeing a massive shift in society's attitudes towards these substances and really restoring them to their rightful place as sacraments for people. I have a website, spiritpharmacist.com. I also have a Facebook page, Spirit Pharmacist. If you would like to follow that, you can kind of follow my work there. But like Shiry said, I think overall what I would like to express right now is that I'm so grateful for this opportunity. There may be a language barrier here tonight for me talking. If something is unclear, please just let me know. We have people that can kind of translate back and forth that will, hopefully make the information accessible to everyone. And yeah, I can just tell this room is full of beautiful people. So thank you.
עכשיו, השאלה קצת אישית, אבל לא נורא, אנחנו כאן אנשים עומדים בפרטיות הרי. סודי סודות, מי כאן התנסה בפסיכדלי? חלק מכם לא מרימים ואני יודעת שהתנסה. אוקיי, אחלה. אז פחות או יותר כולנו.
לא, ממש לא.
ממש לא. אין לך מושג.
ממש לא.
אז אני רוצה שנייה שכולנו נעצום עיניים, אוקיי? ותתחילו לחזור לרגע, בתוך תוככם, להתחבר לאני שלכם. אוקיי? Take a minute to center your breath. להרגיש את הטוסיק יושב טוב טוב על הכיסא. Root down into the earth. And just absorb all that beautiful Pachamama energy. Right into the core of your sacrum, of your root, traveling up your chakras, all the way to the solar plexus, the heart, the throat, your third eye, and your crown. Drawing up all that beautiful, potent, loving, abundant energy of the planet, this solid planet, our mother, that has given us so much. Everything we need to heal has come from the earth and is so supportive of every step that we take, so supportive of our bodies at this very moment, like it always has. go back to one of the most meaningful moments you've ever had connected with psychedelic tools. Take a moment to just put it back in your heart. What was the moment that has provided you with such a clear, potent manifestation of your highest truth, of your highest purpose, of the highest knowing, your highest power, your highest connection, your highest love, your highest self. You're a light, you're a genius, you're a beauty, you're a presence, you're a gift in this lifetime. How has it been revealed to you? Be there. Be in that moment. And invite yourself to remain with it. For our ceremony tonight, guiding your movements, your senses, your connection. Your community, your heart. As you go back to that moment, I invite everyone to take a long, deep inhale. Take a deep inhale all the way to the top. Hold it for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and exhale all together. And with the next moment, next exhale, as we open up our community ceremony here tonight, as we begin our co-creation, we are about to create a beautiful, once-in-a-lifetime ceremony here tonight in this room, this beautiful space, sacred moment in time. I invite you to place attention, intention for tonight. Create an intention for tonight. Intention, הכוונה. איך אתם מתכוונים להיות נוכחים היום? What would you like to see happening tonight? How are you going to show up tonight? Knowing that this is not an expectation, an intention, you're setting your energy and your flow into an outcome, but you are letting go of how this outcome will manifest itself, because it will, just not in the ways that you might be anticipating. So open your heart and draw in that intention for tonight, just one word. Draw that intention into your belly for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Hold it at the top and exhale loudly into the room. And so it is, may all your intentions be met. Let's do this. When you're ready, please open your eyes. Join us.
En tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. En tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien silenciosa. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien silenciosa. Tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. En tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien sin cielo. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien sin cielo. Limpia, limpia, limpia corazón, agua brillante, sana, sana, sana corazón, agua bendita, calma, calma, calma corazón, agua de cielo, agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien se del cielo. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama bien se del cielo. Limpia, limpia, limpia corazón, agua brillante, sana, sana, sana corazón, agua bendita, calma, calma, calma corazón, agua del cielo, mamá. En tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. En tus ojos de agua infinita se baña la estrellita, mamá. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama vence del cielo. Agua de luz, agua de estrellas, Pachamama vence del cielo. זה השיר פסיכדלי. שחר, שחר מאוהב בילדה, צופה בה באור ראשון, מרווה את צימונה משיקופי הלבנה. שחר, שחר מאוהב בילדה, צופה בה באור ראשון, מרווה את צימונה משיקופי הלבנה. כמוה אני מייחל לשחר, במי שהייתי אלייך אבוא.
שנייה לפני את התמונה הזאת, disclosure disclaimer, don't try this at home, basically מה שהדיסקליימר הזה אומר, אוקיי? Educational purposes only, אנחנו לא ממליצים לאף אחד לקחת שום סם שהוא לא חוקי ולא להשתמש בשום פעילות שהוא לא חוקית, אוקיי? Not up to me, you know? אוקיי, אז חזרה לסיפור שלי, ממש בקצרה, כי אנחנו כבר הרבה זמן מעבר לזמן. This is one of my most favorite visionary art paintings. Visionary art is basically a type of psychedelic art, if you will, where the artists translate psychedelic visions into real life. And I first saw this particular painting by this Peruvian artist, Jafau, at a plant medicine conference in Los Angeles about 4 years ago. 3 years ago. 3 years ago? Just about. I remember I've only been 5 years in, so I was very young in my consciousness back then. I walked into the conference and I saw this and I couldn't believe my eyes. Why? Because this was exactly the vision that I'd seen in my first ayahuasca ceremony that I'd done only 2 or 3 months prior to that conference. And I was shocked because I could not believe that someone else basically went in their consciousness to the same place where I had been myself and was able to translate it in such beauty. So that moment was pivotal to me. At the time, I had no idea what psychedelic integration was. Not at all. I knew I had a very hard ceremony. The next day, I didn't know what to do with myself. I couldn't go to school. I called the shaman. I said, I need help. Help me. I don't even know, I have no words to describe where I'd been. And I went to the shaman's house that day, and basically, you guys familiar with the idea of psychedelic integration? Yeah, a little bit. Okay, we'll definitely get into it tonight. But the shaman basically stared at me. He didn't even let me talk very much, and he looked into my eyes and prayed. And what he said was, locking eyes, he said, in 6 months, you're not going to recognize yourself. And that was his way of helping me integrate my experience. Okay, so just remember that, and we'll get back to the end of the story a little later on in the presentation. A little bit about what psychedelics are. Remember, this evening is more about theory. First of all, the word psyche, which is a Greek word, is the term for spirit or soul, and also in the term of psychology, right? When the term psychology actually means study of the spirit, not study of the mind, but study of the spirit. And Delaun, which is also a Greek term, means revealing and manifesting. So psychedelics, by definition, are soul revealing, soul manifesting. The term entheogen was coined by a group of ethnobotanists in the 70s who felt that the term psychedelic was almost overly medicalized, and I know Ben will talk about this a little bit later, but psychedelics were really a term that was given based on what it does to mental states, and the term entheogen, this group of ethnobotanists felt that actually it was kind of overly making them a bit associating them with mental illness, and they really felt that there was an idea or a need to just really call them for what they are, which is they help us to generate the God within us. So the term entheogen means generating God, entheo and gen. Okay, entheo is God. So this is really a term that we like to use a lot when we talk about psychedelic for spiritual use, which we'll talk in this presentation. Psychedelics are also peak experience, and also obviously they're mind-altering drugs that work on serotonin receptors, which Ben will talk about. And as amplifiers of consciousness, if we look at our consciousness as, which it's kind of impossible, but bear with me, as a sum of 100%, okay? How can we quantify consciousness? So there is a theory that says, well, if consciousness was 100%, then only 5% of our consciousness basically is what we are aware of. So right now, you and I in this room, in this lifetime, in this default state, each of us is only aware of only 5% of what is within us and what our consciousness is connected to. Get it? So where is the 95% of the other content, material, the knowings, the insight? Basically, we get an insight into them through the psychedelic tool, right? So the 95% basically is like an iceberg that is buried deep within our psyche. And through the magnifying glass, the amplifying glass of psychedelic tools, we get a glimpse into that massive pool of 95% that's somewhere in our psyche. Okay? So when I say everything, I mean everything. Our truth, our lies, our happiness, our sorrow, our light, our shadow, our individual nature versus the collective nature, our animal instincts versus our higher self, which is actually also does include the animal instincts, the archetypes, all the things we've never dreamed of knowing, but sometimes when we see them through the psychedelic states, we just know that they're true somehow, right? So psychedelics help us remember everything that we are. Sometimes it's not maybe more than we bargained for, right? It's a little bit more than we really would have preferred to know. But there is a gift really in revealing what we call the shadow. The shadow really, or the shadow, which is really the 95%, is really not bad. Shadow, a lot of people associate it with darkness because it's hidden from the light, but it's not necessarily a negative connotation. It just means that it's not in the light. It's not in the 5%. So if we look at it that way, then the 95% can be accessed consciously if we make a decision to partake with psychedelic substances. There are many different reasons why people use psychedelics, and this is kind of the idea of culturally what we do with it. So why do people use psychedelics? The first one is curiosity. A lot of people actually, how many here just approached psychedelics because they wanted to know what the buzz was about? Right? Yeah, quite a few of us, right? Without having an intention on making it any spiritual journey, any psychological healing, not necessarily, right? We're just curious about what our consciousness is. There's the whole idea of sociocultural phenomena and the festival culture where it's kind of common to partake with psychedelics in the rave scene. In the 60s, there was the rebellion, cultural groups that use them. They've been used for millennia as religious sacrament, people that definitely use entheogens to reveal the God within them and within their culture, have been used for millennia. They're also used for medication and healing physical and mental health. People, especially now these days, with all the current clinical research that's coming out and going on, that people specifically, even if they've never heard about psychedelics before, they approach them with a desire to heal specific mental health issues. And people just want to get high. They want to explore their consciousness. Is there anything wrong with that? No. And this is really the idea of cognitive liberty. Is sometimes we don't really want or need a reason. We don't really need to explain to anyone why we want to try psychedelics. We just want to try them because we want to feel high. And that is also a cultural phenomenon. And specifically the idea of recreational or psychospiritual. The term recreational has really gotten a bad rap, right? You know, sometimes we have people that are maybe not necessarily they're not really aware of, they haven't really tried psychedelics, but they've heard of them. The first thing they ask is, or they say, well, I don't want to use them recreationally. Why? Because it means that I just want to do it to play, or I have no meaning or no purpose if I use them recreationally. And it's basically means that I'm just trying to get high and not really, just trying to do something illegal. But if we look at the term recreational, if you break it down, it means recreate. Okay? So even when we recreate with that drum and bass in front of that trans festival in the forest, right? נכון, יש פה את הפסטיבל טרנסים שעומדים ליד הבומים וזה עושה בום 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 ולפעמים the deepest insights מגיעים בדrum and bass הזה, and that's a very healing experience in its own. So there's nothing wrong with wanting to recreate. The idea of psychospiritual, which is what really this evening and tomorrow we'll focus on, is the idea of intentionally going into the psychedelic state with intention, with הכוונה, עם מטרה מסוימת, which again, of course, going to a festival is also a type of intention, but we're talking about with intention of revealing the soul, okay, with intention of diving into the 95%. So the difference between recreational and ritual use and therapeutic use is that with recreational, even though it's at least by me, it's a totally fine experience, but the issues with it compared to psychospiritual ones are that there are more variables that can't be controlled, like you don't necessarily have control of the music or what people will be around you. and therefore the outcomes cannot be controlled. Okay? Whereas in the ritual, which is again the entheogenic maybe type of ritual, maybe the variables are controlled because the shaman does sing specific songs and you're in a specific container, so the outcomes can be improved, right? So you can gain maybe your intentions get met, there's a more higher chance that they will get met. And the therapeutic, which is what's going on now with this whole third wave of the psychedelic renaissance, which we're all part of, is that all the clinical trials, they follow very specific protocols, specific playlists, 1 or 2 therapists in the room, this lamp over here, that, that carpet over there, like everything is controlled, and then in that way that's how they really control the amazing success percentage of healing rates that they get. So it goes from the more loose to the more controlled, but the outcomes are also obviously controlled in that way. And what they do in psychedelic therapy currently, a very brief list of the current studies that are happening across the world right now, specifically in the US actually. MDMA has been shown to help people relieve all these different mental health issues. Psilocybin, addictive behaviors, anxiety, depression, cluster headaches and migraines, anorexia and OCD. Ayahuasca is currently being studied for post-traumatic stress disorder. Cannabis is being studied for autism. And iboga and ibogaine, not really clinically studied in an old-fashioned way, but it is being used therapeutically in various clinics outside of the US, specifically in Mexico, and there's I think one in the Bahamas or the Caribbean and Costa Rica, where they use iboga and ibogaine to help people heal from opioid addiction. So all these different trials are studying the idea of psychedelic therapy with a specific intention of healing mental health and sometimes physical issues. But what about all the other outcomes of psychedelic healing? Right? So if anything, how many people here have experienced healing in any of these aspects, which I call life therapy? Right? At least one, I would say, if not all, most of them. And really, I feel like fellow psychonauts really kind of hone in on psychedelics based on the way that not just how it helps them relieve mental health conditions, but how it helps them be better people, more highly functioning, living life in what they would consider a better way, and showing up to their lives with more happiness. And these are really maybe the outcomes that are maybe less talked about, that we should be noticing. I mean, the idea of authenticity, right, which is not necessarily like a classic, it's not necessarily listed as part of the side effects or the healing effects that psychedelics provide in the clinical trials, but most of these people report that they just feel like themselves. They feel like their true selves, and they feel like they can finally be who they are and express themselves freely, and they find their voice, and they find their purpose in this lifetime, and they have more meaning. So life therapy is really what we're going after. If we don't have the intention of mental health healing, then maybe this could be it.
Sorry, what do you mean by life? Like, what's happened after, like integration? Or?
I'm sorry?
What do you mean by life therapy? What is
I mean like life skills, right? So these outcomes that many people experience, again, without necessarily going in to heal anything, like not, again, authenticity. For me, when I started using psychedelics,
just like the headline.
yeah, so I call it life skill therapy. So our life gets healing.
It's not pathology.
Like
Exactly. It's not pathology. It's not a diagnosis. It's not like a clinical diagnosis. You won't find it.
But it's like outcomes of the therapy.
Yes.
Yes, life.
Exactly. Like improve. Like how can I function in this life in a more improved way? Exactly. So maybe things that cannot necessarily be measured or quantified. Okay, I'm feeling less depressed. But if you're feeling less depressed, so what are the other outcomes?
The word outcomes or something is missing.
Okay.
כן.
כן. כן. So how do people go about psychedelic therapy these days, right? We're living still in the age of prohibition, and most of these substances, which we're going to discuss, are illegal, right? That's why we can't really talk about them. People don't want to talk about them, but they are being utilized, obviously. Research does show that despite their illegal status, millions of people have used and are still using psychedelic substances. Okay, that's a fact. So how are they doing it? Where are they doing it? At least legally. In the United States, currently ketamine is a legally prescribed medication. Is it here in Israel? Ketamine?
Yes, but
Yeah.
Can.
What?
Only.
You can give it in ambulances, they use it
Okay.
in life-threatening situations
Okay.
like the heart. They give ketamine.
Okay. What about an actual like psychotherapy?
Yeah, the result, not psychotherapy, but you can go to hospital and say like you're suicidal or something like this, and they will give you ketamine.
Okay. That's a
Good
good
thing.
technique. Okay. Didn't
You
hear
can't
that here.
take it to Tel Aviv with you, just
Okay.
There also it's not actually a clinical trial.
Yep.
It's because the ketamine is already prescribed, yes.
Okay.
So, but in Ichilov there is a unit that help people with depression.
Okay.
So it's actually psychedelic therapy, and we're
Oh.
using it for now. I think it's for the second year right now.
It's a trial?
It's a clinic that treats people for...
It's not trial because ketamine is already legal. And it's already legal.
Yesterday there was a psychiatric union,
Yeah.
and I talked to the doctor that does that, and I asked him like, how does he only talked about like netunim, only about data, and in the end I came and asked him like, okay, but how is the therapy going? Is there like eye shades? Is there music around? And say, I have no idea. They just come and okay, you're suicidal, and
Wow.
I don't know what to do. Like. It's not like MDMA that everything is organized and the certain setting is like, okay, I have something I can give, just like.
Okay.
This-
So at least
this
they're
is
open to it.
Yeah.
Right, but they're lacking, and this is exactly like the reason why we're putting on these talks. And really what both Ben and I feel so passionately about is that the educational systems are missing.
Yeah.
Right? So
Exactly.
a lot of people are waking up to realize the amazing potential, that the system is waking up to see the amazing potential of these substances, but they don't have the educational systems in place to provide information to these doctors that are open to doing it, but have no idea what the appropriate protocols would be. Yes?
What is ketamine?
Ketamine, Dr. Ben?
So, like they were saying, ketamine was originally an anesthetic, so they would use it to help people put them to sleep for surgeries. In lower doses, they use it in emergency departments for things like if you have a dislocated shoulder, to knock you out for 10 minutes so they can pop the shoulder back in. What they found in the last probably 20 years is that much lower doses are very, very helpful for specifically depression, but probably many other types of mood disorders as well. So now they've taken this drug that was in the United States. It's been approved since like 1969. So it's a very old drug as far as its use in surgeries, but it's now been kind of put into this therapy context to treat different psychiatric conditions and mostly depression.
It's natural. What
Also
effect
in
does it
Israel.
does?
Pardon?
Is it natural, and what effect does it?
No, it's not natural. It's a synthetic substance, and compared to other psychedelics that work on serotonin, it's different. It works on a neurotransmitter called glutamate, but it's not natural. It's actually related to PCP or phencyclidine.
It has a psychedelic effect, though.
Well, it's debatable. So some people call ketamine a dissociative anesthetic still, and would kind of argue that whether it's a psychedelic or not, but if you kind of take the mind manifesting definition of psychedelic or entheogen, people do have very classic ego death, rebirth, massive heart opening types of experiences with ketamine. So there is some debate as far as is it a psychedelic or not, but it seems that the profound mind-altering state that it produces is very healing, and from that perspective, I think it is a psychedelic.
We'll talk more about psychedelic in depth tomorrow. So anyhow, in the US, there are clinics specifically for a psychedelic ketamine therapy, where there is typically either there has to be a psychiatrist, which is the doctor that prescribes the ketamine, but they also, again, no protocols, so either there is a therapist in the room or there isn't. Either there is a music playlist or there isn't. Sometimes they just plug you in and let the person just be in the room until they're done, and then they send them home. No integration necessarily, not even preparation necessarily. A lot of these people are anesthesiologists, מורפים מרדימים בכלל, שהם בסדר, הם תוקעים לווריד, אבל אין להם מושג למה זה חומר פסיכדלי ומה התוצאות של זה. אבל it's legal, okay? And for a lot of people, it does benefit them and helps them overcome depression. And again, it's illegal and depends on what you consider affordable or not, but for a lot of people it is affordable. Okay? And then also cannabis-assisted psychotherapy is something that's really exploding right now in the US. We have 12 states now that have legalized, I think 12, cannabis, and some psychedelic therapists are taking advantage of that, honestly, and they're using cannabis as for its psychedelic traits. Legal churches. And another thing that we have in the US and also other parts of the world, like in Brazil, they have the Santo Daime Church, which is a type of religion where they freely drink ayahuasca as part of their religion and tradition. And in the US, we have the Native American churches where you can have peyote and ayahuasca in some of them as well. So people who want to try it, they go and they sign up to the church, even though that doesn't necessarily mean anything to them, but they want to try again, the sacrament, and that way they could do it legally. The clinical trials, of course, people can try to apply to those if they can get in. The underground, of course, I would say maybe 80 to 90% of people who use psychedelics now in the US, either they do it at home, right, underground, or with underground therapists or guides or ayahuasca circles, what have you, or abroad. Again, people flying to places where the medicine is legal, or at least there is no jurisdiction around them. Right now, Costa Rica is a hot spot because all the psychedelic drugs are there is a gray area, so there are tons of retreats there and everything is legal. So there is a very high level of psychedelic tourism, or truffles in the Netherlands, for example. Throughout the ages, worldwide. So again, this is just the third wave. We haven't invented psychedelics, obviously. Master plants have been used for millennia, thousands of years, as ancient medicines. In fact, just a few months ago, I think in the Andes in Peru, archaeologists found a pouch that contained a few different shamanic-looking accessories and traces of 5 different psychoactive substances, including DMT. Over 1,000-year-old pouch. And then, of course, they've been used for rites of passage, right? יש את החוויות בר מצווה, נכון? זהו, חניכה. סליחה?
חניכה.
חניכה, תודה רבה. As for example, West Africa, the Bwiti in Gabon, the Bwiti tribe uses iboga, the shrub iboga, as a rite of passage to initiate their tribe members into what they consider adulthood. Have and do currently. Using them as ritual, the ayahuasca culture where the entire community, the whole family, including the children, drink together, children running around in ceremony.
At what age? The iboga and the ayahuasca, from what age is
Iboga, I'm not sure, I think it's like 19, or I'm not sure about iboga.
Okay.
Ayahuasca depends. I know at the Santo Daime Church, they put on their mouth of the newborn before he tastes or she tastes their mother's milk a drop of ayahuasca.
Wow.
They don't necessarily trip. It's a plant, okay? But they just the Christian hymn, נכון? כמו שעושים הקתולים, מטבילים אותם באיוואסקה, right? אז זה מגיל קטן, ואני יודעת שבאמת הם שותים. They drink, pregnant women drink throughout the entire pregnancy. Even at childbirth they drink, okay? וילדים רצים בסרמוניes, כאילו זה חלק מהתרבות. And I've been in ceremonies actually where I think the youngest I've seen I think was 7 and 9 years old. And they drink. Of course they drink very little, but they participate in the ceremony and the full part of it. וחייב להיות צלע יהודית, אוקיי? נכון? חייב, אחרת זה פשוט לא. הנה לנו פה הר משה על סנה הבוער, אוקיי?
הזקן.
סליחה?
איפה הזקן?
איפה הזקן?
לא משה.
למה? לא יודעת באמת. למה משה חזה בסנה הבוער וראה את החזיונות וחזר עם לוחות הברית? מי יודע? מי שמע? Talking about Moses. מי יודע? מה הסיפור ששמעתם כל חייכם פה גם אני זוכרת שהייתי קטנה פה בבית ספר חולון.
הוא תמיד מתגלה דרך משהו. הוא לא מתגלה באמת, בהוויה שלו.
אוקיי.
הוא תמיד מסתתר. זה דרך להסתיר אותו. הוא נמצא כאילו בסתר, אבל הוא לא באמת נמצא.
אוקיי.
או שהוא עזה, כי הוא עושה איזה פלט.
עזה, תודה רבה. ועם הוא עזה? עם DMT containing plants. יש על זה תיאוריות. יש לכם פה פרופסור באוניברסיטה העברית ירושלים, דוקטור בני שנן, שיש לו תיאוריה שלמה על זה, בבקשה. הוא טוען שמשה חזה בחזיון האלוהים entheogen, אוקיי? אחרי שהוא טעם מצמח ש-contains DMT, dimethyltryptamine.
And it's also possible that he was like natural born Godasi or something like that.
יכול להיות? לסיבתנו פה, שיחה לפסיכדלים, הוא בטוח לקח DMT ולא יעזור, אוקיי? אז זהו, אז מה הוא חזר עם 10 הדיברות ווואלה וואחד אינטגרציה עושה לאנושות, נכון? עשה את כולנו פה יהודים, הוציא את האנשים ממצרים, ממש נהיה לידר, אוקיי? אז DMT. והנה לנו פה עוד... This is Ben's quote actually, I stole this slide from him, I just think it's so good. The white man goes to his church and talks about Jesus. The Indian goes into his tipi and talks with Jesus. Okay? זה החיבור שלנו, the entheogenic people to the spirit. We are it. We experience it. We don't just hear it. We don't intellectualize it. We don't analyze it. We're just it. Okay? אני יודעת שזמננו מאוד קצר, אז אני קצת אתחיל לקפוץ פה טיפה, כי לבן גם יש הרבה מה להגיד. But obviously, psychedelics they generate a type of mystical, transpersonal experience, which is again a direct experience of spirit. מה חלק מה-characteristics of the psychedelic state? לפעמים נתחיל בזה that we just feel the love and connection to all things, the bliss, we become the trees, we become the sky, we see the energy of all living beings, losing the time and space, we're floating in the universe. זה יכול להיות טריפ אחד, ואז זה יכול לעבור we're interacting with different deities and archetypes, והמלאכים שבשמיים, אנחנו רואים את ה-guardian angels שלנו מגיעים, נוברים פה לתוך מעמקי הגיהנום שלנו, ב-95%, ומתחילים ממש להיות להיבלה בתוך ה-consciousness שלנו, וזה גם יכול להגיע למצב שוואלה, כל השדים יוצאים אלינו, אוקיי? The shadow, if you will. Again, not necessarily bad, but for most people, the idea of a bad trip, right? Which even the most experienced psychonauts will...
Trauma.
Pardon?
Trauma can come back.
Can. It can be very traumatizing, right? Exactly, re-traumatizing. It can be a very harsh experience. In the psychedelic education language, we attempt to say that difficult is not the same as bad. So there are no bad trips, there are maybe challenging experiences. So obviously it wasn't easy. It stretched our capabilities over the limit, okay? ואז מה נשאר לנו לעשות אחרי שסבלנו כל החוויה? באינטגרציה מתחילים לאבד את כל המידע וכל ה-feelings, כל האמוציות שעלו בחוויה, ולמעשה אנחנו מתחילים לפרק אותה, ואולי לאחר מכן עם אינטגרציה מסודרת אפשר להבין באמת שזה actually it wasn't as bad as we think it was. Again, challenging, yes, but in fact it was probably the most profound experience of my entire life, which provided me with the most amazing opportunities for growth, and I'm so grateful for it. אוקיי, אז דבר ראשון אנחנו משנים את השפה שלנו, משנים את החשיבה שלנו לגבי האפשרויות של ה-psychedelic trips. Please.
Did it ever have like a long-term bad effect on people?
There can be, we're going to talk about it tomorrow. Yeah. Yeah. Rare, but yes. every peak experience can have negative outcomes if it's not integrated properly. Okay? Even childbirth can. ממש כל חוויה מכוננת בחיים שלנו, ופסיכדליקס זה חוויה מכוננת. אבל מחר נדבר על זה. The life pie, אוקיי, זה בגלל because psychedelics have such a high potential to impact every aspect of our life, our cognitive, emotional, psychological, everything that you see here, okay, our energy, our home, our work, our lifestyle, אנשים מתעוררים אחרי שההשפעות של ה-LSD נמוגו, מי הם ומה הם עכשיו, הם מחליטים הם חייבים לעבור לג'ונגל וללמוד להיות שמאנס. עוזבים את העבודה, עוזבים את המשפחה, עוזבים את הילדים, מתמסרים למדיסן, אוקיי? זה קורה, זה קרה לי אגב. ועשיתי באמת את השינוי הזה, אבל בגלל שיש כל כך את הפוטנציאל שכל החיים שלנו יכולים להתהפך בטיול אחד, אוקיי? Once a single psychedelic journey, אנחנו באמת צריכים להבין how powerful it can be and how we simply cannot allow ourselves, or at least we can, of course, we can do whatever we want, but maybe we're better off approaching these experiences with reverence, with respect, with doing as much as we can to educate ourselves so we can have the tools that would empower us to move through challenging experiences and to really make the most out of them, to utilize that energy to harness our life and improve them in the very powerful way that they can improve and transform our lives literally, right? The whole idea of one psychedelic journey that can equate to 10 years of therapy. אני עומדת פה עכשיו ואומרת לכם ש10 שנים זה כלום. קחו 20, קחו 30 שנים בתרפי ב-one journey. With proper integration support, הקפיצה שבן אדם יכול לעשות היא מפחידה האמת. כאילו, it's so awesome. Awesome. כאילו, ביראת כבוד. אז אם אנחנו יודעים שזה כל כך יכול לשנות את החיים שלנו, למה יש לנו כרגע את המונחים המאוד פופולריים של set and setting, אוקיי? מישהו פה שמע על set and setting? כולם, אני בטוחה, אוקיי? Great. מה המשמעות של set and setting? בא לך להסביר לנו דקה?
כן.
כן, בבקשה.
להבנתי.
כן.
הסטינג מאוד חשוב, מאיפה שאני באה, שהסטינג יהיה כמו שצריך, שאנשים סביבנו יהיו לתחושתנו תומכים, שהמקום שאנחנו נמצאים בו יהיה מכיל, שיהיה יום או לילה, שיהיה קר או חם, כאילו כל ה... וסט מבחינתי זה כאילו...
כן, נכון מאוד, תודה רבה. בדיוק, את צודקת, setting זה the external circumstances, right? The environment, the people, the accessories, that basically everything in our external environment that we are able to control and we can control. And by the way, you know how, because of how impactful the psychedelics are with the previous slide, really the most predictable thing about psychedelic substances is that they are, for the most part, unpredictable, right? It could be the same substance, same person, same dose, same setting, same mindset, attitude, right? Mindset, attitude, set. הכל אותו דבר, פיקס. same dealer. ולמרות זאת, איכשהו הטיול, משהו שלא חווינו מעולם. Okay, משהו חדש לגמרי, חוויה טהורה לגמרי. So it's unpredictable, אבל יש דברים that we can control. Okay, thank you. אני עוד שנייה מסיימת. אוקיי, אז יש לנו את set setting, שזה באמת מונחים שנהיו מאוד פופולריים בשנות ה-70, and we're very grateful for them. לעניות דעתי, אוקיי, הקטנה שאני, חסרים פה שני דברים נוספים, כדי really to make the psychedelic education framework complete. Number one, skill set. מה זה skill set? set and setting קודם כל, תודה רבה, זה ה-preparation phase, שאנחנו מתכוננים. נגוד, צמח הזה פה, אז זה שם, הכל מסודר, הפלייליסט טעון, סבבה. מה קורה during the trip? איך אנחנו מנווטים את מעמקי ה-95% האלה? תגידו לי, איך? מה אנחנו עושים? מתפללים?
הכלה רגשית, מדיטציה, כאלה דברים?
כאלה דברים,
ארגז
בדיוק.
כלים?
סליחה?
ארגז כלים?
בדיוק, ארגז כלים. בארגז הכלים הזה...
זה שאנחנו סומכים על עצמנו. כאילו האמונה שלנו ביכולת שלנו לעבור את המסע הזה. זה כאילו מבחינתי...
כן. זה באמת חלק מאוד חשוב מזה. ובנוסף לזה, יש גם באמת ארגז כלים שהוא מאוד יישומי, מאוד פרקטי. ממש כמו תרמיל שאפשר לשלוף ממנו ברגע שקורה משהו ספציפי. יש לנו משהו שאפשר לשלוף to counteract that specific event that can help us transmute it, either go deeper into the journey, either to back off from the journey, to get in more dialogue with the medicine. It gives us a lot of agency to control the journey in a way, right? ממש דרך ניווט. לוקחים לנו מצפן, והמצפן עוזר לנו לתמרן בין במאמצים האלה. ומחר אנחנו באמת, אני אציג פה לא את כל הסקילסט שלי, מפאת חוסר זמן, אבל חלק מאוד גדול מהסקילסט שאני מכירה, ואני עובדת איתו, ולדעתי, רק הסקילסט הזה, זה מוריד את ה-bad trips ב-95%. כי פשוט יודעים ברגע האמת מה לעשות. אז זה ממש כמו insurance policy. כן.
זה אדם לעצמו או כמטפלת מדברת?
זה גם וגם. זה באמת, זה משהו שכמובן...
גם כשאתה בתוך זה אתה יכול...
אתה יכול... כן, זאת אומרת, התפקיד מתכמת של המטפל, אם יש המטפל...
לא, למשלת בלי מטפל, אתה גם יכול להשתמש ב...
לא, absolutely, זה ארגז פנימי.
פנימי.
כן, ולמטפלים שבינינו, אם יש כאלה, אז באמת ברגע שאתה יודע את ארגז הכלים, אז ואתה מחובר אליו, אתה יכול גם להציע מן הסתם את הכלי לבן אדם בצורך, כי לפעמים לא זוכים הכל, you know, אבל אם לומדים את זה לפני, במאוד מועד, אז הסיכוי שהבן אדם ברגע האמת ישלוף את זה ממעמקי נפשו, הרבה יותר גבוה מן הסתם, כי הוא יודע, והוא גם יודע למה לצפות, אז they have tools of dealing with challenges in real time, and then things are not challenging anymore. בקיצור, אז מחר אנחנו נדבר על הסקילסט בעומק, אז זה התוספת אחת שלי, והתוספת שנייה, support, שהספורט אני מתכוונת אליו לפני, אוקיי, בצורת מומחי אינטגרציה, אוקיי, external support, which can be a professional, can be peer support, תלוי מה באמת הבן אדם צריך ומה מחפש, during, אוקיי, אבל רק שיש ידיעה שיש מערכת תומכת לפני, או לפני, או לפני, תוך כדי ואחרי. ברגע שאנחנו קובעים לנו את ה-support system, אם זה חברים טובים, משפחה, מישהו שאפשר לגשת אליו, כי אנחנו לא יודעים מה יהיה. Just the fact that we know that it's there if and when we need it. את צוחקת כי?
כי זה בדיוק הפסה. שלא תמיד יש, ואז אתה מפחד.
בדיוק, נכון.
אתה מודע לזה, לך להגיד.
נכון. ורק הידיעה באמת שיש מישהו, זה הכל משנה את הכל, אוקיי? אז גם על זה נדבר מחר. בקיצור, this is...
Why is it separate from setting?
Because support, setting זה הסביבה, environment, support אנחנו מדברים על עזרה ספציפית, זה לא קשור לsetting בהכרח. לא, not during, it doesn't have to be during, אני מדברת על support in the aftermath.
אגב, אם אפשר להוסיף, בסט, זה לא רק מה המיינדסט שלי, זה בנוסף גם מה הסביבה שלי חינכה אותי כל השנים לגבי החומר הזה, כי אז כשנהיה טיפה קשה, אז פתאום ההרצאה מהבית ספר חוזרת, ההוא מהקורס משתחררים, אז כאילו זה... לעומת הורים שלקחו LSD ודיברו עם הילדים שלהם על זה בצורה שונה, אז המיינדסט שלהם שונה.
וגם הפרסומת שלנו סם.
יש גם סייפטי.
כן, כן, בסייפטי, כן, סייפטי וסאבסטנס, נכון?
You have like a gun around there or...
כן, למעשה, כן, לא בדיוק. כל אלו קשורים לכל ה... אוקיי, let me go forward because we have to wrap up, אוקיי? אז דיברנו על ה-4 foundations של ה-Psychedelic Education System, שאני מאמינה בו, ובנוסף, the whole idea of, אוקיי, מה זה ה-Psychedelic Experience? הדעה הרווחת היא ש-it's the actual experience, אוקיי? שזה רק בזמן שלקחתי את ה-LSD, I'm tripping, after 8 hours נגמר הטריפ, נכון? wrong, okay? לדעתי, the journey begins the moment you start thinking about taking the substance. פה ושם מתחיל לך your psychedelic experience. מתי הוא נגמר? never. Okay? כמובן שאנחנו יכולים, יש לנו הרבה, a lot of self-agency in deciding how and when to interact with it, take breaks with it in the seasons of your life, כמה זמן יש לי, כמה יכולות יש לי, אבל זה באמת לא נגמר. This is a ceremony, every day is a ceremony. And the whole idea of integration, שיש דעה רווחת כזאת, that integration happens after the trip. אז גם את זה אני רוצה ברשותכם ככה, to break that mindset, okay? כי אם חושבים על זה, the moment we start preparing, we're already conditioning our lives to allow a temporary disruption. We're already making room for change. What are you doing? You're integrating. Canal navigation, your active engagement and like everything is active, you're integrating. בסוף, מן הסתם, processing, taking action, integrating. במיוחד אם יש כאלו בינינו okay, it wasn't just an isolated experience, נכון? You did an ayahuasca journey, perhaps in a couple of months you're going to have another one. So what happens in the integration phase, right? The 2 months, you're already preparing for your next journey too. So the stages overlap. They're not linear. So at any given moment, I'm integrating a past experience, preparing for the next one. So it's a constant loop, so the integration never really ends. Okay? ומחר נדבר על זה. עוד פעם זה חזר, מה הולך פה? Okay? So anyhow, it's all integration. כל מה שדיברנו עליו, ששוב מחר נדבר עליו, ממש נפרק אותם לגורמים. It's all about harm reduction, risk reduction really, safety maximization and benefit enhancement. זו המטרה של חינוך פסיכדלי. Okay? למזער נזקים, להגביר תוצאות חיוביות, ו-of course safety number one, לא משנה מה. נחזור לתמונה הזאת ונסיים, אוקיי? התמונה הזאת שאני כל כך אוהבת. So this picture, which again, just to refresh your memory, I saw this painting for the first time at a psychedelic conference 3.5 years ago. That conference, which again was just after my first ayahuasca ceremony, I was still within that 6-month time frame that my shaman told me that my life was about to change. Okay? That month, which was I think month 6, אני זוכרת, התעוררתי, אמרתי, החיים שלי לא השתנו יותר מדי, it's been almost 6 months, what's going on? That day, קודם כל, I met Ben. Okay? Ben ואני, we got married after 6 months. Okay? When you know, you know. We had a child. Maila Ava. What else has happened since then? I founded 2 psychedelic organizations in Los Angeles. One of them is about to become a non-profit, עמותה ללא מטרות רווח, שעכשיו אני הנשיאת דירקטוריון שלה. יש לי coaching business מאוד מצליח. אני למדתי פסיכולוגיה, אבל because I'm not licensed in the state of California, I cannot call myself a psychologist. So I work as a coach. And I have a beautiful, flourishing practice with wonderful clients, and have really had the privilege to witness incredible transformations in people's lives. I've also written a coaching program or an educational program called Psychedelic Integration and Therapy, Psychedelic Therapy and Integration, which is now an online course that I'm continuing to develop. I'm also writing 2 books about psychedelics. וכל זה קרה ב3.5 שנים, 4 שנים.
מתי את ישנה?
בפסיכדליק טריפס. שאלה טובה, אבל you know what? ככה, מה שאני רואה, קודם כל, the work never ends, ובאמת אני רואה את ה-mission purpose שלי, אני כבר לא לוקחת all the psychedelics I can get my hands on, נכון? אמרתי קודם שאני שואלת. טוב, לגרון, no more. אני יודעת עכשיו שהעבודה שלי היא by-integration. Because again, I want to make every day a ceremony. My purpose is not to keep going in to get more insights. I feel like I have so many insights already that I don't need to keep going in to get more. כי אני אשתגע אחרת מכל הרעיונות האלה, okay? So I take the insights and I work on them here and I create. And that's what I've done in 3 years, and I want to ask you guys, okay? This was the impact I was able to make on my little life in 3 years. So, if all of us took psychedelics, okay, what could happen to this world? Without integration. With integration, איזה עולם? איזה עולם? גן עדן עלי אדמות. Thank God. נכון? וזהו. זה הסיפור שלי.
So I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the scientific aspects of psychedelics, or at least an overview of that tonight. We're going to be kind of doing a deeper dive tomorrow. Sherree did a very nice job of kind of outlining more psychological theories or ways of using psychedelics in a therapeutic context. She also talked about quite a few of these terms, psychedelic and entheogen, so we won't go over that, but really there's been this evolution of words for psychedelics since they were discovered in the West in the kind of early 40s, 1940s. And I think that one thing that this list of words can tell us is that we don't really know what these drugs are yet. It seems that every 10, 20 years there's a new term that comes up that kind of fits some of them, that maybe not fits others, that fits some people's experiences, that maybe doesn't fit other people's experiences. And psychedelics, although they are illegal today, have actually played a very important role in our understanding of medications and mental health. So originally psychotomimetic, meaning to mimic psychosis. So for somebody that is on a heavy dose of LSD or acid, you look at them and they may be talking to themselves, they may be doing some type of weird gesture with their hand, they could be just kind of rolling on the ground and making some nonsense groaning type of sound. And to an observer, this looks like, oh my gosh, this person is really psychotic. And from this, they actually found that you could block the effects of psychedelics with certain drugs, and this aided in the discovery of certain types of antipsychotic medications for the treatment of schizophrenia. Also, because LSD had such a profound mind-altering effect, it led people to kind of think, reason, or the scientific term would be hypothesize that maybe there's a chemical in the brain that is kind of similar. So LSD actually aided us in the discovery of serotonin. It's a chemical in your brain. It's a very well-studied chemical at this point, and all of the standard types of antidepressant drugs that we have work on serotonin. So we could not have discovered Prozac if we wouldn't have known about LSD, or perhaps we would have discovered Prozac, but it would have been perhaps by a different route or taken longer. I want to focus on this last term here. This one I saw in a paper last year called psychoplastogen, meaning that it kind of makes your brain a little bit plastic. So that's the idea, perhaps, behind using a psychedelic therapeutically, is that your brain is one shape, you want to make it a different shape, and you need to have some type of substance that softens the mind enough to make it plastic or moldable, and the kind of context or therapeutic container is what allows the mind to be molded in a therapeutic type of direction. So it's just very interesting to see this evolution of terms, and I suspect that we'll continue to see different words for psychedelics as we learn more and time progresses. So Sherree mentioned the third wave a couple times in the first part of her speech, but what were the first and the second wave? So this is a picture actually from a cave painting. It's called The Bee Shaman, and you see that he is literally covered with mushrooms. Lots of mushrooms in this guy's hand. This painting is dated to be 8,000 to 11,000 years old. So it's just incredible to think that these drugs are really, really not new. In fact, they're some of the oldest drugs that we've had. So this is more indigenous use, and throughout the world, there's so many indigenous cultures. In fact, almost every indigenous culture uses some type of plant technique along with it. Breathing, for example, breath work is very common, shamanic drumming, to induce this type of altered state. And really the only cultures that didn't were the ones that lived in the Arctic, where there literally were no sacraments to ingest. The second wave was the 1960s. And, you know, I think that this kind of picture here maybe exemplifies the things that most people think about when they think of psychedelics. A bunch of fancy colors, groovy music, turning in and dropping out. But it didn't work in the 60s. It seemed that we didn't know how to use them. Albert Hofmann invented LSD well, he actually synthesized it in 1938, but he didn't really find out that it was psychoactive until the early 40s. And then throughout the 50s, they were kind of giving samples to psychiatrists to sort of experiment on people. And by the early 1960s, the cat was out of the bag, so to speak, in the public. And people were using large doses in all sorts of contexts. It was associated with anti-war types of protests. And the government was kind of like, this is out of control, and we're going to ban it. Cold storage. Psychedelics kind of dropped off the map, and there really was very little research with them for the best part of 50 years. In the United States, the piece of legislation that banned them passed in 1970. So next year, 2020, will be 50 years of psychedelic prohibition. So the third wave is where we are right now, the psychedelic renaissance, so to speak. And this time we are trying to get it right. We're trying to find the balance between the incredible healing these substances can offer, trying to find the balance between what people should be allowed to do with their own mind, even if it is extreme and even if they aren't necessarily ill at baseline, while still protecting the people that need protection. Timothy Leary in the second wave said, we should put LSD in the water supply. Everybody should take LSD. I don't really think that that's a great idea, and I think that's exactly the type of narrative or story that we're trying to avoid this time around. So we need a more careful approach this time. So I'm going to talk mostly about science tonight, neurobiology, treatment of mental illness. I'm not so much going to touch on the study of consciousness, but I think that this is just so valuable in of itself, in that, okay, maybe psychedelics don't work for any type of mental illness at all. They do, but let's just pretend that they didn't. Could there still be a benefit in studying them? Yes, absolutely. They're profound mind-altering drugs. We don't know anything about the mind. In biology, they call this the hard problem. Why do we have a subjective experience at all? And now you have this set of drugs that drastically alters your subjective experience of the world, and the government's saying, you can't learn about that. That's a question that you're not allowed to ask. How can our understanding of the world ever be complete if we're not allowed to study consciousness and use psychedelics as probes, as tools for the study of consciousness? So there's a lot of people, and I'm a pharmacist, right? So I'm in kind of the healthcare world. There's a lot of people that are extremely excited about the treatment of mental illness with psychedelics, and I'm in that camp. But there is some divide, I would say, or conversation that gets heated at times in the psychedelic community about what the Renaissance should look like. What is our end game here? And cognitive liberty is this kind of other aspect. And that, okay, really, I have to have PTSD or obsessive compulsive disorder or depression to access this tool? Or because a mushroom grows in the ground, because the ayahuasca vine grows in the jungle, because DMT is almost in everything, why wouldn't I be allowed to use this as a tool? It seems like God put it here on earth. Why wouldn't I be allowed to access that? And what role does the government have in telling me what I experience in my own mind? So this is what cognitive liberty is kind of about. This failed war on drugs. Keeping drugs illegal doesn't work. We tried that in the United States. We have the most raging drug addiction problem in the entire world. We have more people incarcerated or in prison behind bars in the United States than any other developed nation on planet Earth. So keeping drugs illegal doesn't keep people safer, doesn't reduce drug addiction or drug abuse, and floods our prisons. So it seems that we have to do something different. And so the kind of debate that goes on is, what should we do with these drugs? Should they just be medically legal? Okay, well, medically legal, at least in the United States, means that it's plugged into not the healthcare, but the sick care system. So you can only get it if you're ill. And personally, I don't really think that that's going to do anything to keep people safer. Oxycodone is a medical drug. You know, amphetamine is a medical drug. If I get pulled over with a bottle of oxycodone and I don't have a prescription for it, I'm still going to prison. So that didn't really solve the problems that prohibition creates. Sure, you help people with mental illness, and that in of itself is probably a good thing, but I think that we're shortchanging ourselves if that's where we stop. So this is why decriminalization has sort of gained a foothold and is a movement that is spreading. Because when you decriminalize something, you handcuff the government. If I get pulled over with a drug that is decriminalized, they can't arrest me for it. They can't prosecute me for it. You take that away from them. Well, what can they do? Well, if I really have a problem, maybe they could show some compassion and treat me, rehabilitate me. Plus, it would create all sorts of freedom for people to share these experiences with one another. Outright legalization is an interesting proposition because then, again, you're putting the government back into it. Because legalized drugs, caffeine, nicotine, the government does regulate. They say you have to be a certain age, you have to, you can only buy in this quantity, you have to have this ID to go in, you can consume in special places, things like that. So some people are kind of like, decriminalization is the way, because that gives us actually the most freedom. So I'm going to talk about science here tonight, but just kind of keep all of this in mind, that there's this kind of larger policy debate going on about psychedelics. Okay, so I think I kind of covered some of this already, but how do you make something risky? And I mean, drug taking is a risky behavior, and psychedelics, quite frankly, are pretty safe drugs for the most part, but they're not without risks. So how do you make something that's a little riskier safer? Well, it's not by criminalizing people, keeping it illegal, and making sure nobody has objective information, right? It's about, having people being able to research it, being able to utilize it with, I don't know if you need medical supervision all the time, but some type of supervision or at least support if that's what you want, if that's what you're interested in. Some screening to make sure that you don't have a medical condition that would make psychedelics not an appropriate choice for you. Some of them you may need some lab work. Iboga or ibogaine comes to mind. Probably psilocybin, you don't need much medical work up ahead of time. And I've kind of talked about decriminalization and legalization. So overall, psychedelics do appear to fortify positive mental hygiene. What do I mean by that, right? I mean things like, well, people tend to come out of psychedelic experiences and want to do something different. I want to drink less alcohol. I want to smoke less. I want to exercise more. I want to incorporate a meditation practice. I want to learn a new musical instrument, right? So people kind of come out of these and make these life changes that are probably preventative, that probably prevent them from becoming ill. And I think that this is touches upon perhaps what Sherree was talking about with the life therapy, is that if you're not ill and you're taking psychedelics, or if you are ill and you're taking psychedelics, they're probably going to touch some aspect of your life beyond my day-to-day mood or my obsessive thoughts, and you're probably going to want to adopt some other type of behavior that takes you back, reminds you, or makes you feel like a more authentic and happy type of person. So there are some risks to psychedelics, and I think I'm going to talk most about the risks tomorrow, and we'll go into a lot of detail as far as each substance, what they do, risks specific to that substance. If you're taking mental health drugs, what is the potential interaction with the psychedelics? But for the moment, I would kind of say that kind of the big ones are things like schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, advanced cardiovascular conditions, like you've had strokes or heart attacks, you've got coronary artery disease or kind of narrowing of the heart arteries, seizure disorders, pregnancy plus or minus, probably depends on the substance, are probably kind of the big ones to think about. So they've done all sorts of different kinds of observational studies with psychedelics, as well as kind of clinical studies. And actually, if you look at just people that are using psychedelics in the general population, so these aren't people that are ill, these aren't people that are necessarily doing work with a therapist, these are people that are just taking psychedelics recreationally. Overall, it's associated with a lower rate of mental illness. So it seems that there's something going on here. We don't know what it is. This is an association. It's different than causality. It's not, A so B. It's A and B look like they're related somehow, right? So we kind of think about this. So it could be that psychedelics are protective or actually prevent mental illness. Or it might be that people that take psychedelics are generally healthier, are maybe a little bit more well-read. They're kind of searching for something more. They're seeking in their life for something more. And just by virtue of who they are and their ability to access psychedelics, there's something about that type of person that they actually have a lower rate of mental illness. In forensic populations, so these are people that have been to jail or prison. So these are people that have a, quote-unquote criminal history. Psychedelic use is associated with lower rates of going back to jail or going back to prison. They're associated with lower rates of property crimes, violent crimes. Really, the only type of crime that they're not associated with reduced amounts is illegal drug possession and dealing of illegal drugs, because the psychedelics are illegal drugs. So, if you made them legal, then, that would kind of evaporate. But it seems that they have this sort of protective effect, even in prison populations, against being violent or, returning back to that prison setting. I mentioned contraindications with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder. In clinical trials so far, Sherree kind of touched upon that they've studied depression, anxiety, OCD, or obsessive compulsive disorder, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, and then addiction or substance use disorders. Most people, like the way they're selling this in the clinical studies, right, is like we're treating treatment refractory people. The treatment refractory really just means that you failed an antidepressant or 2 antidepressants, and it's not really that hard to fail 2 antidepressants, because for the most part, people don't really get so much out of them. It's kind of a coin flip whether you're going to get better with an antidepressant or not. So it's kind of like, okay, well, if 30-40% of the people qualify as treatment refractory, then maybe we should just kind of think that the original drugs that we treat them with don't work so much. Because in these trials, they do exclude things like people that are actively suicidal, actively want to hurt themselves. And this is what I think of when I think of treatment refractory or severe mental illness, not just you failed 2 antidepressants, which is most people that are taking antidepressants. Probably it's very rare that someone just takes one and the first time it just works really well for them and they never need to switch, change, or think about any other medication. So the psychotropic medications, or the pharmaceutical types of drugs to treat mental illness, could introduce risks or interfere with benefits. And I think that there's going to be a lot more study in this area, but this is kind of like one thing that, because I sort of have a foot in both worlds, I have a foot in pharmaceuticals, I have a foot in psychedelics, this is sort of where I focused a lot of my work in kind of bridging this gap between, hey, I have depression and I'm taking an antidepressant, but maybe I got 20% better, I got a side effect, I want to try something else, how do I get there? Can I just do it now? Should I stop tomorrow, cold turkey? Or do I need to taper off? So these are the kinds of questions that I frequently help people with, and we'll talk a lot about tomorrow. Mental illness and psychedelics. So, many people with mental illness are interested in psychedelic healing. When it comes to research, mental illness or mentally ill populations are considered kind of special because they tend to be more vulnerable. They tend to be more at risk of getting taken advantage of. And you can imagine that, maybe some of these people are on these medications or not on medications and are feeling quite desperate. They've heard about ayahuasca through a documentary or a YouTube video that they saw on the internet. They thought, wow, that sounds incredible. I want that. Where can I find it? So they search on Google or whatever search engine that they're using and find, oh, here's an ayahuasca center. However, usually the ones that are advertised on the internet are the scams. They're the ones that exploit people. They're the ones that kind of don't have the proper types of safeguards or screening process in place. I don't want to say this is true of every single ayahuasca center that is advertised or you can find on the internet, but you can understand how somebody that's desperate, that's looking for this, could kind of easily take the first opportunity that they come across, and that may actually not be the best opportunity for them. So Sherree mentioned underground psychedelic healing, and this has been going on. People have been doing this since before they were illegal, and certainly all the while that they have been illegal. And there's a lot of people in this kind of space that are really earnest, really beautiful, really want to help people, and really do a good job. On the flip side, anytime you have something that's illegal, it kind of creates a black market or a magnet for some bad actors or bad players. People that want to manipulate, exploit, and certainly there are all sorts of crazy stories from the psychedelic underground about sexual abuse that has occurred during psychedelic experiences and things like that. So again, people are feeling desperate. The healing of psychedelics is not yet legal. They maybe are just looking for the very first opportunity that comes their way, and or just buying things off the internet and taking them themselves at home without any type of support and expecting that they're going to get the same result as a clinical trial where they had 2 therapists, 90-minute integration sessions weekly, the whole thing took 3 months. I don't know. Maybe you can get some healing taking psychedelics by yourself. I think that that's true, but perhaps if you're really trying to tackle a serious problem, maybe you really want to think it through and have some serious support in place. So this is kind of what I'm talking about, is that right now there's this imbalance between people that want to use psychedelics and people that are really qualified to facilitate therapeutic, psychedelic types of experiences. So these are all the people want to use it here. These are the people that are qualified. And so you have this kind of big buildup or bottleneck, essentially, of people that want this experience, that want this healing, that it's just not quite available to them yet. However, the headlines are everywhere. I don't know what it's like in Israel. Do you guys have lots of psychedelic headlines about, you know, this is the next big thing, and, you know, mystical, spiritual experiences are the key to feeling better, and this kind of thing, you know, it's all over the New York Times and things. So people are reading about this. Everyone knows about it.
On the other side of the map.
Pardon?
Like on the other side of the map, like 3 guys came from a rave party after taking LSD, and they are hallucinogen in the emergency room. So they are not always that glow like in America.
Okay, all right. So it's more of the same thing that we've heard. Yeah, so more highlighting risks.
Yes.
So more just kind of like, hey, somebody took this
Damage,
and
yeah.
some really horrible outcome occurred. Yeah. Yeah, well, those cases exist. I mean, I work in an inpatient psychiatric unit. I see people come, and sometimes there is some history of taking LSD. A lot of the times it's, well, I was taking LSD and smoking crystal methamphetamine, right? Or, yeah, I was 19 years old and I took 10 hits of LSD, you know, at my, you know, friend's basement, and things didn't work out well for me, right? So this is exactly what we're talking about with psychedelic education, is that when drugs are illegal, nobody has the right information. Nobody has the right tools. Nobody, I mean, LSD, the substance is dosed in micrograms. That's incredibly small amounts. 1 microgram is a millionth of a gram, right? So it's incredibly powerful, yet people don't really have the right psychological framework for it. They don't know what doses to take. They have to buy their drugs that could be contaminated or impure. You know, in the United States, they've had several ecstasy tablets that have tested positive for a very potent opiate named fentanyl now. So it just kind of seems like, oh, a bunch of teenagers ended up in the ED or emergency department from taking ecstasy. Oh, they stopped breathing. That's not ecstasy. That's probably it's cut with something else that's not right, right? So there's all sorts of ways that these headlines, you know, in some ways, yes, it's true. They have risks, and this outcome truly did occur. But, you know, sometimes there's pieces of the story that are critically missing that give people the kind of thought that, oh, this drug must be very bad. And it's like, well, my motto, well, it's not my motto. I borrowed it from this guy named Dennis McKenna. But his quote is, there are no bad drugs, only bad ways to use drugs. That bottle of morphine, there's no demon in there. It's just if you use it correctly or incorrectly. Same thing with psychedelics. Okay, so a lot of different pharmaceutical drugs have risks in combination with psychedelics. Contrary to popular belief, I mean, there are some combinations of pharmaceutical drugs for mental health and psychedelics that are truly dangerous. And the ones that come to mind as far as psychedelics are ayahuasca and ibogaine, are probably the two that have the biggest risks in combination with standard mental health types of drugs. As far as the other ones, it's not a perfect rule, but a lot of them actually just kind of squash the experience. They just kind of kill it. You don't trip out. You don't have the subjective experience that you were maybe hoping for. You don't have the big breakthrough. You don't have the insight. You just kind of sit there for 4 hours and wonder what all the hype is about, right? And you kind of walk out thinking, this doesn't really work, or, you know, even worse, you know, some people are kind of, again, going back to desperate, is sort of like, you know what? I'm at the end of my rope. I'm so overwhelmed. If this doesn't work, I'm just going to end it all. And then it doesn't work, right? So even diminished intensity of subjective experience could be a risk for some people. It can be really hard to get off of pharmaceutical mental health medications. that's just kind of the truth. Most of them have some type of physical dependence that occurs. Some are actually addictive and are controlled substances, things like amphetamines, Adderall, things like benzodiazepines, Xanax, Valium. They might have different names here. No, those are the right names. I can say the generic names because those are kind of universal. So the Xanax is alprazolam, the Valium diazepam. There's a bunch of others. Klonopin, clonazepam, Restoril, temazepam. You can go on and on and on. So getting off of these medications can be really difficult. And again, this is, I think, one of the pitfalls that I see in the way that especially the psychedelic underground or psychedelic retreat centers, medical tourism types of centers are operating, in that they have a screening process. Good. I'm glad you have a screening process. Oh, you're taking antidepressant? I'm sorry, you can't come here. You're going to have to get off of it. Call me when you're off it. Okay, so I've talked with several people that are very frustrated because they're looking for a retreat center to go to and they're on an antidepressant. They say, hey, what should I do? Should I just stop it all at once? Or should I just lie to them about it and not stop it? It's like, neither. Neither of those options are good, right? Stopping it all at once puts you at risk for a much worse withdrawal syndrome. Kind of like, you know those magic tricks where they try to pull the tablecloth out and keep everything just sitting on the table? I don't know, some magicians can do that, but I can't, right? Everything just falls on the table. And I think that that's kind of the way it is for most people when they just try to stop their mental health drugs all at once. Return of underlying illness can be one too, and this is something that if you really do kind of taper off or reduce the dose gradually, you can kind of minimize the withdrawal syndrome, and it probably gives you a lot more information because it's kind of like, well, I've been tapering off over a period of maybe 2 or 3 months, and I was doing really, really well until, you know, I stopped the drug actually, and then 2 weeks later I started feeling the withdrawal. Kind of like 2 weeks after you stopped the drug is when you started feeling withdrawal. I think that's actually your original symptoms kind of coming back. So you have a lot more information when you go slower. Plus it's a lot easier, right? You don't want to put yourself on some type of crash course to get to the experience. Set and setting. What kind of experience you're going to have if you show up in the peak of some type of withdrawal from a pharmaceutical antidepressant? You know, probably not the same experience that you would have if you slowly tapered off, let the withdrawal run its course, and then came to the experience fresh in a good place mentally, or at least the best place that you can show up mentally, you know, if you're really trying to treat something like depression. Clinical expertise may be necessary for effective and safe preparation, I think is the kind of conclusion here. And I'm a pharmacist, I like safety, but first and foremost, going back to that slide, I'm a cognitive libertarian. I believe people should be allowed to do this, right? I think that there's a way of minimizing risks, and that's what we're talking about. But you know, that's why I kind of have language like maybe necessary, because I don't really want to make blanket statements that everyone has to do this. Everyone has to have a therapist. Everyone has to have some psychiatrist watching over their experience. Because the truth is that many, many people have very healing experiences outside of that type of context. Okay, so let's talk about different types of psychedelics for a moment. I have sort of 3 main classes or types of psychedelics up here. The first is called phenethylamines, the second tryptamines, and the last one is the easiest to say, other. So phenethylamines are actually a very diverse class of drugs. They include things like chemicals that your brain makes, dopamine, norepinephrine, adrenaline or epinephrine is a phenethylamine. It includes drugs for ADHD or maybe addictive drugs like amphetamine. It also includes drugs that dilate airways for asthma like albuterol. So phenethylamines aren't just psychedelics, but there are certain phenethylamines that have psychedelic types of properties or effects. How do they work? They tend to release serotonin. So serotonin is normally stored in neurons. Something like MDMA causes a dumping or a release of serotonin in the brain. So it's basically you have much more serotonin in your brain for a period of 4 to 6 hours.
When you say in the brain, you mean synapse?
Yes, yes. Specifically in serotonin synapses. But yeah. The prototype or kind of, I don't know, flagship, first, original, OG type of phenethylamine is mescaline, found in peyote cacti, also found in several other types of cacti that grow in South America. Well, it was formerly known, and most people still call it the Trichoceros genus of cactus, but it's actually officially Echinopsis at this point. Things like San Pedro or Huachuma are also mescaline-containing cacti. It doesn't stop there. Alexander Shulgin was a chemist, very famous psychedelic chemist. Did a lot of work in the 1970s. He wrote 2 books called PiCol and TiCol, standing for phenylethylamines I have known and loved, as well as tryptamines I have known and loved. And this man is responsible for synthesizing literally a couple hundred new types of psychedelic substances. So although you kind of have your prototypes, or the kind of ones that are most commonly known, most commonly studied, the world of psychedelics is very deep and rich with different types of research compounds. Tryptamines, opposed to releasing serotonin, bind directly to serotonin receptors. And so, pardon?
Hebrew koltanim.
Can you say that again?
The receptors.
Receptors are koltanim.
In Hebrew.
Okay. So, what you're asking about is the synapse, right? So, do I have a picture of a synapse? I don't. I'm sorry. I don't have a picture. Okay. So you're talking about releasing. So that's release from the presynaptic neuron. When I'm talking about binding to serotonin, that's on the postsynaptic neuron. Okay. And the prototypes here are LSD or acid. That's probably your synthetic prototype. And then psilocybin, found in many types of mushrooms worldwide, and DMT or dimethyltryptamine are your kind of prototype types of tryptamine psychedelics. Now, I think I'm going to move over here because I think I'm kind of blocking it a little bit. You have other. These tend to not work on serotonin. They work on other neurotransmitters. They work on things like glutamate or opioid systems. And these include ibogaine and ketamine. There is also metabolites or analogs of ibogaine, like noribogaine, and similarly with ketamine, there are analogs, things like methoxetamine or PCP or phencyclidine would be another one that kind of fits that category.
Did you place salvia in there?
Yeah, salvia would be other. Salvia is mostly a kappa opioid receptor stimulating type of drug. So yeah, that would kind of fall into other. But when I say other, I don't really want to mean that ketamine and ibogaine is similar or ibogaine and salvia is similar. They just tend to work on opioid and glutamate systems, but they have very different types of effects, durations, medical risks, things like that. So although these 2 types of psychedelics work a little bit differently from one another, the kind of bottom line here is they bind to this one special type of serotonin receptor, the serotonin 2A receptor. So I'm going to spend quite a bit of time now talking about the serotonin 2A receptor and what happens when this receptor is stimulated or activated by a psychedelic substance. So it is the most widely expressed type of serotonin receptor. There are 14 known types of serotonin receptors in our body, but the serotonin 2A receptor is the most widely expressed. It's been detected in most types of tissue. So we kind of think of psychedelics affecting your brain. Well, I'm sorry, the serotonin 2A receptor, it's in the tissue that lines your blood vessels, endothelial tissue. It's in muscle tissue. It's in hormone or endocrine types of tissue. And it's in the immune system. It's in immune types of tissues.
The nerve system. It's not in the tissue, I mean the muscle or the blood vessel. It's in the nerve system only.
It's in all of these.
It's only in the. It's also in the cells of the muscle, for instance.
Yeah, like there's different immune cells that express serotonin 2A receptors. The linings of your blood vessels express serotonin 2A receptors. Yeah. Interesting. And this is probably what mediates like extreme toxic types of reactions, like mixing ayahuasca and MDMA. You get serotonin syndrome. A lot of that has to do with effects on your blood pressure and things like that. So it also kind of makes sense with what we know about extreme situations or toxic types of situations. So beyond consciousness, which is kind of like the bottom line, what we're talking about here tonight, there's been a series of papers that have come out recently that have talked about, wow, actually it seems that a low dose of a psychedelic called DOI can potentially reverse the effects of atherosclerosis or inflammation of your veins that tends to lead to things like heart attacks. There's also been, some studies that have demonstrated that the same psychedelic DOI is as potent as an anti-inflammatory drug as things like prednisone or corticosteroids. So this kind of opens the door to thinking about psychedelics as cardiovascular drugs, drugs that might treat autoimmune conditions. So it seems that beyond any type of interest in mental health or consciousness, these drugs could enter the clinic to treat all sorts of illnesses that we're just now discovering that they could be helpful for.
And they have psychoactive effects at the same time?
So the doses that they're studying for immunomodulatory or anti-inflammatory are actually supposedly subperceptual, so they're more like microdoses. So again, this is going to be much easier to convince the government probably that, hey, we're using a dose that's so low that the person doesn't trip out or have really a noticeable type of psychoactive effect. Because yeah, it would be a big problem if it was like, yeah, it prevents heart attacks, but you're just tripping out every day. Like, okay, like that sounds like a kind of a silly strategy that no one's gonna really think is a good way to live your life in order to prevent a heart attack. But if you could take a small dose every other day, every third day, and that really did have an effect at treating something like rheumatoid arthritis, or preventing another heart attack if you've already had one, well, that's the type of thing that, in the pharmaceutical industry, now you've got what they call a blockbuster, or a drug that sells more than $1 billion every year. Sherree told me I had 5 minutes. These are serotonin projections in your brain. So where are psychedelics working? You have all of these serotonin nuclei here in the brainstem. They project to the cortex. And it's mostly the cortex where serotonin 2A receptors are in the brain. And this cortex is what does a lot of sensory processing for us. It does a lot of higher level or abstract thinking, abstract reasoning. So it kind of makes sense perhaps that psychedelics are very disrupting to our normal type of consciousness if this serotonin 2A receptor is found in the cortex. Serotonin 2A receptors are also found in the limbic system. This is more an ancient part of the brain, thought to be more of a reptilian brain or an emotional brain. And certainly psychedelics are not all about just kind of fireworks and, I'm not thinking straight. They're a lot about the intense, overwhelming types of emotions. And, when you're talking about using psychedelics therapeutically, okay, it's pretty groovy to see some flashing lights and waving things, but that's probably not where the therapeutic effect comes from. It probably comes from this big emotional moving or emotional processing type of effect. Okay, so serotonin 2A psychedelics do a lot of different things, and they've studied it from quite a few different angles at this point. One would be gene expression. So it seems that these drugs turn on or off different types of genes. So this makes sense in that, like, okay, well, how is it, Ben, that you're telling me you can take a psychedelic drug and it impacts your health for months or years afterwards? Well, if you take a drug and, okay, the effects wear off, but the way that your cells express genes have changed on a more long-term basis, this kind of really creates a plausible reason why they could have very long-term effects, even though the experience itself was, you know, rather short, half a day or the most part of the day if it was LSD. Neuroplasticity. So kind of talking about the psychoplastogen effect here. They've actually found that psychedelics are able to stimulate nerve growth or neuron growth so that neurons are able to talk to each other and communicate with each other where they weren't able to before. So this is interesting in that you can kind of think, well, yeah, you're thinking differently. There must be a different neuron pathway that's associated with those different types of thoughts. And again, it kind of seems that, well, a lot of people with depression or obsessive compulsive disorder are stuck in these very rigid thought patterns, very pessimistic types of thought patterns. And so thinking differently, thinking with a more flexible type of way allows them to function better. I think this kind of fits in with the default mode network. The default mode network is this series of interconnected parts of your brain. And what we think that this does at default, when you're not thinking of something else, when you're not focusing on something else, is that it really has this sense of self-reverence. So according to physics, we're not separate. It's all atoms in space. But for some reason, my brain is telling me that I'm up here on stage and you're out here as the audience listening, right? So what is it about my brain that is telling me that I am me, that I am myself? We think it's the default mode network. So this is kind of neuroscience's parallel to the ego in psychology. And in literally every type of psychiatric illness that we're aware of, we can find some disruption or change in the default mode network. So certain brain structures are hyper-connected. They're talking to each other way too much. Other brain structures are hypo-connected. They're not talking to each other enough. It seems that psychedelics, when you take them, really turn off or shut down the default mode network and allows this kind of resetting effect to occur where the relationships have changed between the brain structures afterwards. This kind of parallels the mystical experience. Because what is the mystical experience? Oh, great. I was the end. Okay. So what is the mystical experience? Sherie talked about profound spiritual experiences, but in science, you know, we can't just say like, hey, you took mushrooms. Was it profound?
Whoa.
Yeah, right? So it's sort of like that seems a little bit unscientific to us, so we have to come up with some type of rating scale to measure it. So what they've come up with is the mystical experience questionnaire. And this has different domains to it, and the 4 domains are sacredness and positive mood. So not just euphoria, but sacredness, I think is the kind of core of this one, is that you weren't just high, you just experienced something that you hold very, very close to your spirit as precious to you, right? So it's sacred. Second is boundlessness, so kind of oceanic boundlessness, feeling, I don't know, in Sufi terms, that the drop has returned to the ocean, right? This sense of wholeness, oneness, interconnectedness, that, you know, me, myself, as Ben, I was that drop, and now I've somehow become the ocean. existing outside of time and space. So, okay, the constructs of time, the way that the mind and yourself normally experience time as this kind of linear thing is diminished or turned off. What's the last one?
God?
Yeah, well, I think I kind of mixed two of them. I kind of mixed the oceanic boundlessness and the interconnectedness.
Border dissolution and interconnectedness together.
Yeah. So I guess all of this really just comes down to ego dissolution. Your ego gets dissolved. And this, I think, is really interesting and neat because it really kind of, I'll kind of wrap it up here, is that science is now demonstrating what people have experientially known about psychedelics for thousands of years. And that, I took this and I existed outside of my time. Oh, well, now we have some brain structure that confirms that that was what was happening. Even Aldous Huxley, I mean, he was a Westerner. He was a very famous author. He wrote Brave New World. He also wrote a book about his mescaline trips called The Doors of Perception. And then, Jim Morris named his band The Doors after the doors of perception. Come on, baby, light my fire. And Aldous Huxley's theory about psychedelics is that the brain is essentially a reducing valve, and that you have all of this consciousness everywhere. So this kind of fits in the 95-5 type of theory, right? Is that there's all of this consciousness everywhere, and the brain's function is essentially to reduce it enough so that you can actually focus on something. Because I don't know if anyone's tried to focus on something while they're very, very high on LSD, but it's typically extremely difficult. Mostly because your consciousness is so open, you're getting so much sensory input from everywhere that you can't just focus on that one type of task at hand. And so the ego dissolution and the shutting off of the default mode network fits with what indigenous people have known about psychedelics for thousands of years, and it also fits about what some of the first Westerners that explored psychedelics like Aldous Huxley theorized about psychedelics. So, I just lost the clicker. Where did I put it?
It's in your pocket.
Put it in my pocket. That's a good guess. I used something to do it. So, the Renaissance is gaining momentum. They're likely going to become therapeutic agents very soon, but for me personally, that's going to be a half victory, because I think that we really need to push further and need to push for restoring these drugs to where they were at the beginning. Sacraments that you're allowed to use in ritual, in community, for spiritual worship, for religious practice, for recreation, for recreating yourself. So we have a quote here to finish. Do not try to approach God with your thinking mind. It may only stimulate your intellectual ideas, activities, and beliefs. Try to approach God with your crying heart. It will awaken your soulful spiritual consciousness. By Sherree M. Thank you all so much. Do we have time for another song here, or?
Yes, and before we do that song,
Can I ask a quick
Yeah, sure. We have time for a
yeah, let's
Q?
do 2 questions.
Just like a quick question, because I'm wondering if you have any. I was looking at your website. I didn't see it there. Any like formal website that can give information regarding drug interactions and the therapies or.
Not really. That's what I'm working on my website. So I have a series of blogs written about kind of like antidepressants and psychedelics, benzodiazepines and psychedelics, stimulants and psychedelics. I have 2 that are sitting on my word processor and getting pretty close on antipsychotics and psychedelics and pain, analgesic medications and psychedelics. And then really part of that is that a lot of the information we don't know, a lot of it I'm sort of extrapolating or guessing, and then a lot of it is kind of I'm limited in what I feel is okay to write, because I think a lot of it comes down to individual situations, individual intentions. I mean, what are you getting out of your standard pharmaceuticals? Are you trying to get off of them, or are you just trying to get a little bit better with a psychedelic? So these are the types of conversations that we kind of go through, and I feel like is really best sorted out in on a one-on-one. But what you're talking about is absolutely necessary.
There is the cold data, the pharmacokinetics,
Yeah.
there's it's there, but it's not collected in such
Correct.
a way.
So that's exactly what I'm doing, is collecting, curating, and I have a chart tomorrow that I made specifically for tomorrow's seminar that I'm quite proud of, that is probably going to show up in a blog post in the next few months, because I think it is exactly the type of thing. As far as recreational use, tripsit.org has a beautiful chart of combining different types of recreational substances, but I think they have antidepressants or SSRIs on there, but they really don't have much in the way of any of the other types of mental health medications. But as far as like combining different types of psychedelics or psychedelics and cocaine and things like that, the Tripsit website's incredible. It's really good.
DanceSafe UK also has that chart.
DanceSafe is very good harm reduction information, but it's not so much. I think what you're asking for is just kind of like a really quick, like, can I plug in the drugs that I want to take, and will it spit out some type of answer as far as like, green light, yellow light,
Don't do
red
that.
light, right? Yeah, like that. Yeah. So the Tripsit is definitely that. Tripsit.org, I believe. And if you just type Tripsit drug interaction chart, it'll pop up. If it doesn't pop up, click on images, and then it will definitely be there. One more?
Okay.
Okay.
Great. Thank you, Dr. Malka. And thank you guys, באמת. From the bottom of our hearts, first of all, מדברת בשמי ובשם בן. We're so grateful, and our hearts are overflowing to first of all meet such an amazing community here in Israel. אני בעצמי, בן עכשיו נכנס ל-Israeli Network בפייסבוק. נטוורק בפייסבוק בטח? כמה? אז חלק מכם אנחנו בטח מכירים לפי השם. And I always tell Ben, that the Israeli Psychedelic Network is, in my opinion, not because I'm Israeli or anything, but ממש לדעתי the best online Facebook group that exists מכל different groups שיש לנו בארצות הברית, אין על הקבוצה לישראלית. באמת, אני אומרת את זה. המון ידע, המון כוונות טובות, ופשוט אחלה אנשים. אז תודה שבאתם. סליחה? כן, גרייט, יופי. אז תודה קודם כל שקיבלתם אותנו בזרועות פתוחות, תודה שבאתם להשתתף, תודה שבאתם ללמוד. היום באמת זה החלק הראשון מחלק ב' שיקרה מחר. היום זה היה הלמה, אוקיי? The what and the why. Tomorrow we're doing the how. אז זה היה קצת פחות מ-40 slides. Tomorrow we have over 140 slides. פלוס קבוצות דיון. יש לנו מחר יום מאוד עמוק. אני יודעת שיש כאן הרבה אנשים שרשומים לסדנה כבר. והיה לכם מחיר מיוחד להיום ולמחר. מי שעדיין רוצה להצטרף למחר, you can, ואם אתם רוצים לעשות את זה, אז תשתמשו בקופון קוד, תיכנסו לאותו אתר שהשתמשתם לקנות את הכרטיסים להיום. בגלל שהיה לנו מחיר משולב לערב ולמחר, אז תשתמשו בקופון קוד OR, אוקיי? או, ותקבלו הנחה שתתן לכם את אותו מחיר כמו את של המחיר המשולב, אוקיי? אם אתם עדיין רוצים ברגע האחרון ככה להצטרף אלינו מחר. What else? We also, because it will be a long day, please, we will have a 1 hour lunch. It's Friday, יום שישי יהיה פה. יש כאן כמה מסעדות מסביב, אבל maybe busy. Try to maybe bring your own lunch, maybe that would be the best. Just plan to not be gone, so... ארוחת צהריים אבל לחזור בזמן. אני יודעת שהיום התחלנו נורא באיחור, וגם היו את כל ה-technical hiccups שהיו לנו. מחר מתחילים ב-9:00. אנחנו מחר עושים לפי שעון ארצות הברית, אוקיי? אז בבקשה, Doors open at 8:30, we'll begin at 9 o'clock, אוקיי? ואנחנו גם מספקים כמובן את כל החומר, כל המצגת של מחר, למי שמגיע מחר, הכל כבר מודפס לכם, פלוס תקבלו color version of a PDF, נשלח לכם עוד כמה ימים גם שיהיה לכם במחשב, אז יקבלו את כל החומר. Anything else I'm forgetting? תודה רבה לשני המארגנות הענקיות שלנו, חן ובתיה. Without you guys, בחיי, מה זה integration? Okay? From vision to realization. We had a vision, you fucking realized it, we fucking realized it, וכל הכבוד לכם, המון תודה על כל מה כל הטרחה שלכם וגרמתם לערב זה להיות. לבעלים, לשבט, שזה מקום כל כך יפהפה. איפה אדי? הוא פה? לא פה. אדי, תודה שקיבלתם אותנו, ותודה למוזיקאי שלנו, ינון. תודה, שעכשיו we'll grace our hearts with one final song before we leave. We love you guys. ממש תענו לנו לפגוש אתכם. Thank you.
בי את הדרך, רגע אחד